Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, all.
Okay.
So we will go ahead and get started. We are recording this, so we will also have it posted on social media and on the TAPS website. Let me go to my screen. And thank you for being here. So as most of you know, in lieu of our conference this year, we are going to do these monthly lunch webinars that'll serve as continuing education credit. And we will be running these through May. And with that, I'd like to introduce Shar Buckus, who is the director at Waypoint Montessori. She's been with Waypoint as their director for 4 years, and she's also founded many schools prior to that. So Shar has stepped up to be our chairperson, and so she's really taken the lead to help find speakers and put these monthly continuing education presentations together. So thank you so much, Shar, and I will let you kick it off.
Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon, TAPS community. It is my pleasure to actually introduce Dr. Rao from the Rao Institute. Dr. Rao has earned his PhD in business from the Columbia Business School. And over his career, he has taught courses at Columbia, Kellogg, Berkeley, the London Business School, and has done several workshops for both Stanford and Harvard Business School. Dr. Rao is a successful author, Are You Ready to Succeed?, which I actually have my copy here, and Happiness at Work. He has helped thousands of entrepreneurs and executives worldwide to achieve a quantum breakthrough in their personal and professional lives. Dr. Rao's life work is to help people effect a transformation in all of their lives. His TED Talk on happiness has been viewed by millions and has been a catalyst in helping others rediscover joy in life and genuine happiness. So during these turbulent times, we felt like it was a great idea to have Dr. Rao, who brings hope to leaders, allowing them to positively impact their communities. And he has recently presented at a LEAD worldwide conference, which I attended, and he was just amazing, impacting all kinds of school heads, administrators, and faculty in a global venue. Today, he's going to be sharing his insights in his talk, How to Find Radiant Joy in a Chaotic World, with our TAPS community. So I'm very excited and pleased to be able to introduce Dr. Rao as our keynote speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Shar, and a wonderful good morning, good afternoon to everybody on this call. It is my pleasure to be with you today. And thank you, Shar, for inviting me. And I'm going to be speaking about how do you find radiant joy in a chaotic world? Now, looking at it, this seems bizarre. I mean, we all know what's happening in the world outside, on the political scene, on the economic front, on the global front. Can you really find not just joy, but radiant joy, the thought of being wonderfully alive? And the short answer is yes, indeed, it is possible. In fact, I'd go further. Not only is it possible, but it's necessary. Because unless you can find that in yourself, you'll find it very difficult to transmit that and help others find it. And it is possible, and I'm going to demonstrate that to you right now. That's me, and those are my books. And if you order them from Amazon right now, my publisher will be very happy. And I know that a number of you are feeling stress in your life right now, and I'm about to share with you a method by which you can eliminate stress straight off the bat. And if you really want to eliminate stress in your life, here's what you have to do. I'm sorry, it was too good an opportunity to pass up, but this really works. I've asked thousands of people on 6 continents, do you have stress in your life? And most persons say that they have more stress in their life now than ever before. And of course, I then ask them, why do you feel stress in your life? And they come up with answers, dozens of answers. And I've been able to boil them down to 8 major categories. And I'm going to share these categories with you. These categories are not mutually exclusive. They overlap, but they're sufficiently distinct that they form separate categories. And I'm willing to bet that if you were to look at your life, and if you were to tell someone why you feel stress in your life, you'd pick one or more of these categories. So what are these categories? Well, first of all, there's financial. I do not have enough. There are all kinds of expenses that are due. Mortgage payments, unexpected accidents and unexpected contingencies. And for one reason or the other, you feel you don't have enough. So finances are an issue. Then there's relationships, typically with partner or spouse, but could be with in-laws, children, siblings, work colleagues, bosses. You'd like them to be harmonious. You'd like them to be proceeding in a measured direction. They'd like them to be, leave you feeling good, but it's just not working out the way you'd like it to be. Then there's children. What are children? Children are bundles of joy sent to bring meaning and purpose to your life, perhaps, and they do. But have you noticed that children do the darndest thing? The Shah did not mention is that I am a grandfather and my grandson is just 1 year old. So I can testify to the truth of what I'm about to tell you, which is children do the darndest thing and they begin early. They poop right after you change them. I go further. Not only do they poop right after you change them, but in the interregnum, when you've taken off the soiled diaper and you're about to put the new one on, they pee. And then they grow up and they do the most inappropriate. They fall in love with the most inappropriate people. They drop out of high school. So yes, children are bundles of joy sent to bring meaning into your life, but they can add to the stress in your life. Then there's business and career. Given your smarts, given your hard work, given your ambitions, you want to be at a particular point in your career, but you're not there yet. And health. I don't think I have to say a great deal about this in coronavirus days, but even apart from the pandemic, there is stuff floating around like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And many of you have elderly relatives and there's dementia. So when you're concerned about health, it's not just necessarily your own health, it could also be the health of others near you, but that could be a significant stressor as well. Then there's the big external stuff, politics, climate, crime. Just look at the headlines of any daily newspaper. And how many of you feel there's too much to do and you don't have enough time to do it all? And last but not least, I'm not where I want to be. Look back to the time you graduated high school and you had ambitions and dreams that here's what I'm going to be like, and this is how my life is going to unfold, and this is where I'll be at this point in my career, and you're not there. So these are the reasons why people feel they have stress in their life. Now, one of the things, by the way, I promised you is that what I'm going to try and do is show you how you can find radiant joy in your life right now. And the only way you're going to pull that off is by thinking differently, and not just thinking differently, but thinking radically differently. And we're going to begin that process now. By the way, the notion of thinking differently is not new to you. You've been exposed to it many times. How many of you have been told, for example, to see the glass as half full rather than half empty? Or that every problem is an opportunity in disguise? So the notion of thinking differently is not new to you. You've not only been exposed to it, but you embrace it. But despite that, most persons have singular difficulty in consistently thinking differently. And that's because most of us try to think differently by trying to think differently. It doesn't work. What I'm about to share with you is a process by which you get to examine the mental models that you hold, which cause you to view the world in a different way, in a particular way. And as you start making changes in this, you literally become a different person. And when you become a different person, you don't have to think about thinking differently, but you think and behave differently organically. Okay, so that's the process, and we're going to get started now. The reasons that you feel stress, or the reasons that you think you feel stress, are not the real reasons. There's one reason and only one reason you feel stress. This is so important, I'm going to repeat it. There's only one reason you feel stress. And the only one reason you feel stress is because you have a very rigid idea. This is the way the universe should be, and the universe is not playing ball with you. So in your world, in your ideal world, you have a certain number of zeros in your bank account, and you have fewer zeros than you would like, and you resist this, you resent it, and in that resistance and resentment, you create the stress in your life. Do you have someone in your life who you think causes you stress? Could be a partner, could be a child. You expect that person to behave in a particular manner, and that person is not complying, and you resist and resent this, and that's why you have stress in your life. No matter what other factors you picked that I showed earlier, the only reason you feel stress in your life is not because of that factor, but because you have a rigid idea of how the universe should unfold, and it's not working. That is why you have stress in your life. Now, I invite you to think of your life in a particular manner, and I will guarantee that you probably don't think of yourself in this manner, but it's true. You are a control freak. Your entire life has been nothing but an attempt to control some part of your internal or external environment. Let me repeat that. You are a control freak, and your entire life has been nothing but an attempt to control some part of your internal or external environment. And this applies to everything in your life. Are you married? Why did you get married? Well, you got married because you noticed that person and it felt good. And then maybe 10 seconds later, or 10 minutes later, or 10 days later, you did it again and it felt better. And you got to know the person, and you said, gee, you know, if you get married, there's going to be great sex and companionship, and seems like a good idea. Let's push it along. As you got married. I'm sure those of you who are married have recognized that there's no such thing as happily ever after. But nevertheless, that's the reason you got married. It was an attempt to control some part of your internal or external environment. Everything you do is an attempt to control some part of your internal or external environment. I have some good news for you. You do not have control. It gets better. You never had control. It gets even better. You never will have control. The only thing you have is the illusion of control. Control is a myth. You do not have control. Now, one of the reasons, now this is something, by the way, that many of you probably know intellectually, but you haven't accepted it. And the reason so many people are feeling stress at the levels in which they're experiencing it right now is because the pandemic has brought home to you viscerally that you don't have control. So you might think, for example, you know, my marriage is on the rocks. I don't know if it'll survive. I don't have control. Or you might think, my son has applied for Harvard and I don't know if he's going to get in. I don't have control. But underneath all of that is the sense that some things are there and you can depend on it and you do have control. Like, if I run out of toilet paper, I'll go down to the supermarket and pick up a roll. Or if I'm hungry and there's no food in the house, I'll drop by to my favorite restaurant and order what I like from the menu. Now, because of the pandemic, even those things have been called into question. So you realize at a very, very, very deep visceral level that you do not have control. And that causes a great deal of extra stress because what you knew intellectually is now really hitting home to you. Given the truth that you don't have control and that you never had it and never will, how can you eliminate stress and cultivate extreme resilience? Well, I have to share some concepts with you before that becomes clear. First, a concept called mental chatter. And mental chatter is an internal monologue that you have going on in your heads all the time. Begins when you get up in the morning, is with you throughout the day, is with you right now when you're thinking, gee, is what this guy says true? True? Am I a control freak? Is this why I have stress in my life? All of that is mental chatter. You've always had it. It's been with you ever since you were born. It's been with you every day when you open your eyes. So much so that you don't even think about it and probably were not even aware of it until I explicitly drew it to your attention right now. Mental chatter is like an unwelcome relative who's shown up at your house and you can't kick him out. So you live your life as best as you can. You suppress it, you ignore it, work around it. You try to live your life as best you can with your mental chatter. That's a big mistake. And the reason it's a big mistake is because you construct your life with your mental chatter. Let me repeat that. You construct your life with your mental chatter. You think you live in a real world, you don't. You live in an artificial construct and you made it with your mental chatter. It's as if we were all living in the matrix, only this was not a matrix constructed by an alien civilization out to enslave you, but something you constructed with your mental chatter and your mental models. Let me illustrate that further. One of the more important teachings of the Buddha was the parable of the second arrow. And the Buddha asked Ananda, his disciple, Ananda, if an arrow were to hit you in the arm, would it not be very painful? Ananda nodded his head, yes, Lord, it would be very painful. And if a second arrow would hit you exactly where the first arrow hit, would it not be even more painful? Ananda nodded his head, yes, Lord, it would be even more painful. And then the Buddha had a question. Why then do you shoot the second arrow? Now, I noticed some of you looking puzzled, so let me explain, and I'll explain by means of a story. There was this woman, and she was a good mother, and she had a son who just turned 16 and became eligible for his provisional driver's license, and he did. And one day he comes up to his mother and says, hey, Mom, a group of friends and I are getting together, and can I take the car? And the mother says, of course you can't take the car. You've just got a provisional license. You're not authorized. Where do you have to go? I'll drop you. He says, no, Mom, you don't recognize. It's very important that I take the car. It's also very important that you not be there. The mother says, of course not. If I can't be there, then that's fine. There's Uber, there's Lyft, where do you want to go? And he says, no, you don't recognize. I have to take the car and you can't be there. And the mother said, no, but you know how children are. He begged, he pleaded, he wheedled, and bit by bit, she started giving way. And she took promises. You're not going to do any drinking. No, Mom, no beer, nothing. I'm not going to drink. And you're going to call. Yes, I've called. You'll be back home by 10 o'clock. Yeah, I'll be back home by 10 o'clock. So finally, reluctantly, she gives him the car keys. And of course, the moment he gets the car keys, he forgets all his promises. He has too many beers, forgets about the curfew, doesn't call home. On the way back, he gets into a serious accident, has to be operated on immediately. And his mother was in the hospital with him. And when he was wheeled out to the recovery room, she rushes home so that she could take a quick shower and go back to the hospital. And that time, her friend calls. And her friend says, what kind of a mother are you? How could you possibly have let him take the car? You're not a mother, you're a murderer. Are you shocked that a friend would say something like that at this juncture? Probably. But you'd probably be less shocked if I said it wasn't what her friend told her, it's what she told herself. That is the second arrow. Having a son in the accident, in the hospital being operated on is bad enough. Does it make matters better to tell yourself that you are an incapable mother, that you are a murderer? No. We do it all the time. The second arrow is always delivered by means of mental chatter. Let me repeat that. The second arrow is always delivered by means of mental chatter. And I'm going to give you an exercise right now. You have 30 seconds to think about it. Think of some situation in your life that is causing you a problem that you think is problematic. And I will wager to you that your mental chatter about that situation is making it at least an order of magnitude worse. Then there's mental models, and a mental model is a notion you have that this is the way the world works. But this is really not the way the world works. It's your model of this is the way the world works. And the more you believe in your model, the more it seems that this, in fact, is the way the world works. And very soon you built a silo around yourself that's so thick that you can't break out of it. You got a mental model for everything. You got dozens of mental models. You got a mental model for how do I bring up my children. You got a mental model for how should I teach my courses. You got a mental model for how do I find a person to marry. Dozens of models. The problem is not that you have mental models. The problem is that you're not aware that you have mental models. You think this is the way the world works, but it isn't. It's your model of this is the way the world works. And let me bring it home to you with an example. And I don't want you to just listen to me. I want you to put yourself in the situation that I'm going to describe to you. You're going to an important appointment and you're running late. You're driving. Got that? You're going to an important meeting, you're driving, you're running late, you're stuck in a massive traffic jam, and it's one of those beastly hot Texas afternoons, and the air conditioning in your car has broken down. Got that? You're going to an important meeting, you're running late, you're stuck in a massive traffic jam, it's a beastly hot day, and you have no air conditioning. And all of a sudden, a car cuts in front of you. What are your feelings towards the driver of that car? It's probably fair to say that your feelings towards the driver of that car are not those of loving kindness. Road rage was invented in California, but it spread the world very fast. Now I'm going to share some information with you. The driver of this car that cut you off and almost caused an accident has received some disquieting news. His son has been involved in an accident and he's desperately trying to get to the hospital, and he has no knowledge of whether or not he'll ever see his son alive again. Now, when I share that information with you, can you feel your rage, anger, and frustration palpably drain out of you to be replaced with sympathy and compassion for a fellow human being? Probably. But you don't really know whether the guy who cut you off is a distraught father or an inconsiderate jerk, right? So here's what you're going to do. You're going to hire a private investigator to look into the matter and report back. And if the private investigator reports back that he was an inconsiderate jerk, you'll get really pissed off. But if the private investigator reports back to you that he was a distraught father, you'll feel great compassion. But until you know for sure, you're going to remain neutral. Is that what's going to happen? Probably not. You're not going to hire a private investigator, but this means you're never going to know whether the guy who cut you off was a distraught father or an inconsiderate jerk. But the deeper point is, it really doesn't matter. You had the choice of determining what is the emotional domain you're going to occupy, and you made a decision. You had a choice, and you made a decision. In all likelihood, all of this happened so fast that until I explicitly peeled it apart from you, you never paused to consider that you had a choice and you made a decision. But now that I have peeled it back, are you clear that you did have a choice and you made a decision? And the reason you made the particular decision you did is because of the mental chatter that you entertain and the mental models that you hold. And the more interesting thing for you to bear in mind is that you face such a choice in your life dozens of times every day. Let me repeat that, dozens of times every day. And in many of those instances, perhaps the majority of those instances, you choose to occupy an emotional domain where you feel angry, frustrated, and you never recognize that this was a choice you had and a decision you made. So how do you start dealing with this? Well, first of all, I want you to consider that your awareness is like a flashlight. What does a flashlight do? A flashlight illuminates whatever you shine it on, correct? You shine it on the floor, it lights up the floor. Shine it on the ceiling, it illuminates the ceiling. Your awareness is just like a flashlight. Now, what do you do with your flashlight of awareness? You shine it all the time on the things that are problems in your life. More precisely, on the things that you think are problems in your life. Everyone on this call is incredibly privileged. Do you recognize that? Do you have to bother about whether you're going to have lunch tomorrow? Do you have a bed to sleep in? Do you have a roof over your head? You do recognize that any of these is a big deal in a big chunk of the world outside, right? So when I pointed out, you nod your head, yes, yes, I am extremely privileged. But you don't feel extremely privileged. You feel put upon and stressed out. And why is that? That's because you shine the flashlight of your awareness on the things that you think are wrong in your life. That's where you pour all your emotional energy. And the many things that are good in your life, including the fact that you're listening to a webinar like this and the fact that you have a bed to sleep in and food to eat, you don't shine the flashlight of your awareness on it, and therefore you don't notice it. It just goes by as part of the background of your life. Let me prove it to you right now. I want you to shine the flashlight of your awareness on the chair in which you're sitting. And when you do that, you immediately feel the pressure of your buttocks on the seat of the chair. You can feel the fabric or leather on the back of your thighs. Is that right? 30 seconds ago, you were not aware of it, but now you are. That's because you shone the flashlight of your awareness on it. So, stop shining the flashlight of your awareness on the things that are wrong in your life and start shining it on the 200, 300, 500 things which are pretty damn good about your life. And I would advocate you begin doing this a few minutes before you go to bed. Let the feeling of appreciation and gratitude well up in you. When you get up in the morning, don't go immediately to the place of, oh my God, there's too much to do and I don't have enough time to do it all. Let that same feeling of appreciation and gratitude well out. Bathe in it, wallow in it, immerse yourself in it. And as you go through the day, frequently do the same. It is my hope that eventually you'll get to the point where your default emotional domain is appreciation and gratitude. And what's the benefit of that? It is that when you're in the default emotional domain of appreciation and gratitude, you're not anxious, you're not nervous, you're not fearful. The two cannot coexist. So if you're in the default emotional domain of appreciation and gratitude, you find that stress cannot live with you, it just leaves. 300 years ago, Galileo got into a spot of trouble. Do you guys remember? Galileo postulated that perhaps the sun does not move around the earth, perhaps the earth moves around the sun. And for that, he got into considerable trouble. Every single one of you is convinced that Galileo got it wrong. The earth does not revolve around the sun, it revolves around you personally. I notice some of you smiling, but I'm really being deadly serious. Think about how, no matter what happens, you very quickly bring it down to what's the impact on me. Your partner gets a great job offer, and you think, how is this going to affect our relationship? Or your daughter drops out of high school to begin an in-depth exploration of controlled substances. And you think, is this going to be covered by insurance? Is rehab covered by insurance? No matter what happens, you very quickly bring it down to what's the impact on me? We all live in a me-centered universe. What I'd like to share with you is if you live in a me-centered universe, you are going to live a life, a mediocre existence punctuated with flashes of pleasure, but that's just the way it is. The only way you're going to step out of that into a life where you're radiantly alive is if you can find a cause which is bigger than yourself, a cause which brings a greater good to a greater community, and you have tremendous flexibility in defining both the greater good and the greater community, you're going to live a mediocre existence. Ancient England, site of a great cathedral being constructed, and the architect was going to the scene of the construction, and he came across three people, all of whom were doing the exact same thing. There was a big block of stone, and they put a smaller block of stone on top of the big block of stone and beat it with a hammer till it broke. And he asked the first guy, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Can't you see I'm breaking rocks?" "Why are you doing that?" "Because I get paid a halfpenny a day." And the second guy said, "I'm helping build the wall behind me." And the third guy said, "I'm helping build a great cathedral. And when it is over, people are going to come from all over the world and they will be inspired and I will have had a small role to play in it." And the third guy was the only one who recognized the architect and said, "Truth be told, I don't like doing it. It's backbreaking labor and I can get better wages for less effort. And I'm only doing it because I want to learn. Will you teach me to build a cathedral?" And 20 years from that date, the guy who was breaking rocks was dead. The guy who was helping build the wall behind him was living a life of desperate poverty, but the guy who was helping build a cathedral was on his way to building his first cathedral. That is pretty much a choice that each one of us has every day. We can get up in the morning and we can break rocks, or we can get up in the morning and help build a cathedral. I cannot tell you or that the cathedral that you are building, you're the only one who can decide that. But I can tell you that unless you define the cathedral that you are building and anchor yourself in it, you're going to live a mediocre existence. Every day in the morning when you get up, you have a choice. You can go break rocks or you can help build a cathedral. You have to live simultaneously at the 6-inch level and the 50-foot level, or the 50,000-foot level. The 6-inch level is very important. That's where the work gets done. That's where you decide, these are the emails I have to reply to, these are the phone calls I have to return, these are the tasks I have to get done today. That's where the work gets done. It's very important. But if you spend all your time at the 6-inch level, you're going to get your nose upgraded. You have to simultaneously be at the 50,000-foot level where you look at the arc of your life and say, is this where I want to be going? It's as if you're in an ocean liner in the middle of the ocean and you make a 1-degree course correction. And it doesn't seem like much, but over the course of a 2-week voyage, you'll land up 100 miles different from where you would have been otherwise. So you have to learn to be other-centered, to find a cause which is bigger than you are, and that brings a greater good to a greater community. And then you don't have to seek meaning and purpose. They crowd into your life. There's something that we do, and we do it multiple times every day, and it's very deleterious to our health, and we don't even recognize that we're doing it. And that is the habit we have of sticking a label on anything that happens to us. I want you to consider something. Whenever an event happens to in your life, to you, it does not cause suffering. Suffering only begins the instant you decide, this is bad, this is terrible, I cannot bear it. Let's assume you get fired. You now have a lot of spare time. But you get fired and then you say, oh my God, I got fired. How am I going to meet my mortgage payments? And there are these other expenses that are due and my car is breaking down. This is terrible. And the moment you say this is terrible, at that instant, suffering begins. Suffering doesn't begin when you get fired or lose your job. Suffering begins the moment you say, this is bad, this is terrible. So let me tell you a story. This comes from, it's an ancient story, comes from the Sufi tradition, and it talks about a man and his son, and they lived in a beautiful valley, and they were very happy, but they were also very poor. And the man decided that he was going to become a rich man, and he was going to become a rich man by breeding horses. And he bought a stallion. Didn't have enough money to buy a stallion, so he borrowed heavily from the neighbors. And the very day he got a stallion, it kicked the top bar loose from the paddock where he housed it and ran away. And the neighbors came around commiserating, you were going to become a rich man, but your stallion has run away, and you still owe us money. You are in a pickle. And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? That stallion fell in with a group of wild horses which were close to where he lived, and he was able to entice them into the paddock which he had repaired, so escape was no longer possible. So all of a sudden now he had his stallion back, plus a dozen wild horses. And by the standards of that village, that made him a wealthy man. So the neighbors came around and said, we thought that you were destitute, but fortune has smiled upon you. How lucky you are, you're a rich man. And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? The man and his son started to break the horses so they could sell them on the market, and one of the horses threw the man's son and stomped on his leg, and it broke and it healed crooked. And the neighbors came around and said, oh, he was such a fine young lad, and now he'll never be able to find a girl to marry him. How terrible. And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? That summer, the king of the country declared war on the neighboring countries, and press gangs moved to the villages, rounding up all the able-bodied young men to serve in the army. But this man's son was spared because he had a game leg, and the neighbors had tears in their eyes as they rolled around. We don't know if we'll ever see our sons alive again, but you still have your son. How fortunate you are. And he shrugged his shoulders and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? And it goes on like that forever. Now, I invite you to look back on your life. Can you recall any instance where something happened that at the time it happened, you thought this is terrible, but you can now look back upon it and say, hey, that wasn't so terrible after all, or even that was good? I'll tell you an instance. It actually happened in Texas. So there was a matriarch, and her family were widespread, and she was very fond of her family. So she decided that she was going to have a gala get-together. She was wealthy enough. She sent tickets to all of her foreign relatives, and everybody came together. And there was going to be a huge event. And the day before that event, she slipped on some steps and broke her hip. And the entire event was canceled because she was in the hospital. Terrible, right? Yeah, but actually what happened is, as a result of her being in the hospital and the test she had to undergo, they found out that she had a rare cancer that was growing very rapidly. But because they detected it when they did, they were able to operate, and she recovered fine. And in all likelihood, if she had not had that discovered at that time, she would have been dead in less than 6 months. Can you recall anything that happened to you that at the time it happened, you thought this was terrible, but you can now look back upon it and say, hey, this is not so terrible or even good? And I noticed many of you nodding, so there are at least 1 or 2 such instances you can recall. So I have a question for you. If something happened in your life that at the time it happened you thought was terrible, but you can now look back and say it wasn't so terrible, or even it was good, is it possible that what you are today about to label bad could in X years turn out to be good? Is it possible? Just asking yourself that question will move you to a different emotional domain. And if you then ask yourself the next question, is there anything that I can do to actually make it good? And you move seamlessly from the realm of despair to the realm of possibility. That is how you become extremely resilient. You're in what you consider a horrible situation, locked in, restrictions on your freedom, you can't go out and congregate. Is there any conceivable way in which this could turn out to be good? And then what is it that I can do to actually make it so? And you will find that vistas open up to you that you would not even have considered otherwise. Here is another very important concept I want to share with you. Most of us live our life the following way. I set a goal for myself. I tried very hard to achieve it. I succeed and life is a blast. Or I set a goal for myself. I tried very hard to achieve it. I failed. Life sucks. We live a life oscillating on a sinusoidal curve between elation and despair, and we spend altogether too much time at the despair end of the spectrum. It's a lousy way to live. There is an alternative. And the alternative is set a goal for yourself, make it an ambitious stretch goal, it's fine. But once you have set the goal, forget about it. That's right, forget about the goal, don't think again about it. Because the importance of a goal is that it establishes direction. Once the direction has been established, forget about the goal and spend all of your time and your emotional energy into what are the actions that I have to undertake in order to meet my goal. The goal is a destination. A destination is a mirage. You get there, you tarry a few moments, and then you're off someplace else. The journey is with you always. The journey is the only thing you have. When you have a goal, the goal is a destination. The actions that you undertake are your journey. When you focus on the actions that you can take in order to meet your objective, two things happen. Number one, you actually start to enjoy the journey. And number two, the probability that you'll get to the goal you want actually increases. The destination, as I said, is a mirage. You know, people talk about, I want to climb Mount Everest. How much time do you spend on top of Mount Everest? A few minutes to a half hour max. You get up there, your buddy takes a picture of you, your buddy gets up there, you take a picture of him, and then you're on your way down and you hope you don't get killed in an avalanche. So if you want to climb Mount Everest, you better enjoy the weeks and months of acclimatization on Base Camp 1, Base Camp 2, and so on. Works the same way in life. You have a goal, you try desperately hard to get to the goal, and if you succeed, fantastic. If you don't succeed, fantastic. Because here is the mistake that we make. We think the benefit of setting a goal and trying our level best to achieve the goal is achieving the goal. Wrong. The benefit of setting a goal and trying our level best to achieve the goal is the learning and growth that happen in us and to us as we try our level best to achieve the goal. If we actually achieve the goal, that is a bonus. If we don't achieve the goal, the learning and growth have already happened, so it's a win. It's a no-lose proposition. But the funny thing is, when you focus on your actions, the probability you'll get to the goal you want actually increases. John Wooden, who was the first person to reach the Basketball Hall of Fame, both as a player and as a coach, mentioned that every time he worked with a new team, he never talked about winning or outscoring opponents. He always said, when it's over and you look in the mirror, did you do the best you were capable of? If you did the best you were capable of, the score really doesn't matter. But if you did the best you were capable of, I fancy you'll find the score to your liking. It's a perfect articulation of invest in the process, do not invest in the outcome. A dozen years ago, a little more than that actually, the United States Army conducted a SEAL team operation in Afghanistan. A unit of 4 SEALs was dropped behind enemy lines with the objective of killing or capturing a Taliban leader. And the mission went horribly awry right from the beginning. They were surrounded and attacked by dozens of armed Taliban. 3 of the members were killed, and the 4th, Marcus Luttrell, was badly wounded, had broken bones and gunshot wounds, and in that condition, he scrambled down a steep slope, swam miles in an icy river until he was found by friendly villagers who then eventually returned him to American forces. that was actually made into a movie called Lone Survivor. And of course, journalists asked him, how did you survive in situations like that? And he attributed that to his SEAL team training. And he described that in his book. And SEAL training culminates in something called Hell Week, and that is exactly what the name implies. There is an entire week in which you maybe sleep a dozen hours, if that. You do all kinds of very strenuous physical activities. You swim miles in the ocean, and then you roll about in the sand and run for miles with the sand rubbing you raw. You crawl under barbed wire with live fire overhead. And when you're in Hell Week, if you even think, oh my God, there's 5 more days of this, you fail, you drop out, you don't succeed. The only people who survive SEAL training in Hell Week are the people who think one more step. And Mark said, the only thing I was thinking about when I was there is I have to take one more step. I doubt that any of us are ever going to be in as adverse circumstances as he was, but it's nevertheless a great recipe for living. You invest in the process, do not invest in the destination, do not invest in the outcome, and whenever you are, just remember one more step. It's a wonderful idea to laugh. So find something every day that will make you laugh. And no, I'm not talking about a smile to your lips. I'm talking about a deep belly laugh. One of the things I recommend, by the way, is there is an English humorist called P.J. Wodehouse, and I think, and many others think like that with me, is that he's the greatest humorist who ever lived. So one novel by P.J. Wodehouse a month, and your life will be different. I'm going to share 2 other concepts with you, and then we're done. This one comes from one of the world's greatest scientists, Albert Einstein. We revere Albert Einstein because he was a great scientist. He discovered the theory of relativity, the special theory of relativity. He discovered the photoelectric effect, for which he got the Nobel Prize. But what less of us know is that Einstein was also a philosopher who had a pretty good view of life. And one of the things that Einstein said is, the most important question you will ever ask is the universe friendly? Let me repeat that. Einstein said the most important question you will ever ask is the universe friendly? Now, most of us live in a universe which is neither friendly nor unfriendly. It's just indifferent. It's ignorant of our existence and indifferent to us. So here we are going around doing our thing, and there's the universe going around doing its thing. Sometimes it seems to help us. Sometimes it seems to frustrate us. But essentially, it's a random process. And the universe neither knows nor cares that I'm alive. And that's the world that most of us are living in. But supposing the universe was aware of your existence, and suppose the universe was not only aware of your existence, but was also well disposed towards you. Well, if the universe is aware of my existence, friends don't shaft friends, right? What if the universe was friendly? Friends don't shaft friends, right? So why does the universe give me stuff I don't want? You know, I want to go off on vacation and the universe gives me a pandemic and cancel flights. I want to build my business, but my customers are leaving me. Why does the universe give me stuff I don't want? Well, what if the universe was giving you stuff that you don't want, but it's precisely what you needed for your learning and growth? You know, you're a child and you want a tub of ice cream, but your parents give you fruits and vegetables, and you don't want fruits and vegetables. You want a tub of ice cream, but your parents give you fruits and vegetables. And it's only when you have a much greater level of maturity and wisdom that you can go, thank God my parents gave me fruits and vegetables. What if the universe was like that? It does not give you what you want, but it gives you exactly what you need for your learning and growth. What if? It's readily apparent that regardless of whether or not the universe was benevolent, if you believed that the universe was friendly, your experience of life would be immeasurably better. And if the universe actually was friendly, magic happens in your life. So how do you go around to noticing that the universe is friendly and anchoring yourself in that? That is too complicated an issue to go into detail in a talk like this, but if you're interested, let me recommend my book, Are You Ready to Succeed?, where I go into it in some detail. But I'm going to share one important technique with you right now. Start looking for signs that the universe is friendly. There are so many things that happen in your life that are such signs, but you ignore them. You do not shine the flashlight of your awareness on them. Say you suddenly remember a friend, a good friend with whom you've been out of touch for a while. And that same evening, you get an email or a phone call from that friend. Or let's say you order takeout during these days of pandemic, and after the driver has picked it up, you say, oh my God, I should have ordered this. And when the food lands up, you find that the restaurant has included the item you wanted as a gift. Stuff like that happens all the time, but we do not shine the flashlight of awareness on it, and we do not recognize that here is a sign the universe is friendly. The more you start looking for such signs, the more you find them. Write them down. And as you write them down and see how many instances there are of that, you will reach your personal tipping point where you say, gee, maybe the universe is friendly after all. And there are other methods that I mentioned in my book, Are You Ready to Succeed? And now the final concept I want to share with you. This one comes from the Native American tradition. And it talks about a young man who was growing up to take his spot among the adults of the tribe. And the final rite of passage was a conversation with the medicine man. And the medicine man told him, here is this dog, kind, intelligent, loving, trustworthy. And here is this wolf, malevolent, vicious, ready to snap at and kill anything. And the dog and the wolf are fighting. And the dog and the wolf are both inside you. And the young lad asks, which one's going to win? And the medicine man says, whichever one you feed. Now think about it. Inside each one of us, there are altruistic, let's help each other and make the world a better place impulses. And inside each one of us, there are let me grab everything I can for myself and to hell with the rest impulses. And the two are always fighting. It's your job to selectively identify and feed the dog in you. It's also your job to selectively identify and feed the dog in everyone around you. And when the dog in you becomes strong and becomes friends with the dog in the other person, magic happens in both of your lives. Very often we feed the wolf, both in ourselves and the other person, and we don't even recognize that this is what we're doing. Let's say you go to the coffee machine and you're having a bad day, and as you're grabbing coffee, your colleague comes up and he mentions to you, I'm having a bad day. And you say, you're having a bad day? Let me tell you about my bad day. And your bad day easily tops his bad day, and you go off feeling smug about it. You've just fed the wolf in both yourself and the other person. In every interaction you have with everyone, with your partner, with your children, with your colleagues, with your boss, with the Uber driver who takes you to the airport, with the guy who sells you your newspaper, ask yourself, am I feeding the dog or am I feeding the wolf? In your words, in your tone of voice, in your body language, are you saying something that leaves that person more positive, optimistic about life, feeling better about his situation and the world outside? Or are you saying, behaving in a manner that takes him into a downward spiral? Are you feeding the dog or are you feeding the wolf? Every conversation you have, every interaction you have with anyone, just ask yourself, am I feeding the dog? Am I feeding the wolf? You get into a political discussion and you bemoan the fate of the world and, the lousy politicians up there. Are you feeding the dog or are you feeding the wolf? And if you're conscious of that and you make an attempt to say, I am going to try and feed the dog, you will find that as you try to feed the dog in others, you're feeding the dog in yourself. And both of your lives will improve. So just ask yourself this in every conversation, every interaction you have. Am I feeding the dog or am I feeding the wolf? And with that, we are done. We have time for some questions. If you like what you heard, please go to my website. It's there on the screen, therawinstitute.com. Click on Join Now, and that'll give you access to my blogs, and you'll hear from me. And if you have any questions, you can email me. My email is right there. And we have time for some questions. So Shar, would you please see if, put them on the chat box, by the way, if you have any questions. Have any questions come?
Not yet. Nope.
All right. And by the way, if you want to ask your question, that's fine. Just unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah.
No questions from the great state of Texas.
I think for me, I have a question and it may help everybody else. As a lot of us are heads of school or administration, I think the hardest thing that I find in the day, especially in this pandemic, is, I know there's a lot of our staff that have a lot of internal stress that are not sharing it because, they don't want to kind of roll it to everybody else. Is there something, that we can do to help, sometimes shine that light on those individuals to help them, love what you did today? Is there something that we can take away for our staff? Maybe they aren't expressing it, but maybe that, we can start that conversation to see where they are with something.
Yeah, this is a very good question, Shar, and it's also applicable to businesses. I have many coaching clients who are CEOs of their firms, and the same thing is true of their employees. And I'm saying that in these times, there are several things that they can do. One thing that works very well, and this is something that I am advising the CEOs who are my clients, is whenever you have your meetings, begin your meeting by having every person recount at least one good thing that happened in their life in the previous 7 days or since the last meeting. And something that made them feel buoyant, exuberant, good about life, share one such thing that happened. The other thing that I also told them to do is make it a point to instantly communicate to them and with them anything they heard. For example, someone owns a car dealership and one of the customers said, oh, your salesperson did that and that was so nice. Immediately take note of who's the salesperson and drop him an email or in the internal site that you have and let him know, hey, the customer said that, this is wonderful, congratulations. So whatever it is that happens that you can instantly transmit that will leave that person with a momentary flash of, yes, good, keep your eyes out on that. So, and encourage them to speak up. Say, when they're feeling stressed out, what they're really doing is they're shining the flashlight of their awareness on the many things that are wrong in their life. And you don't tell them, listen, you dummy, you're shining it on the wrong things in your life. Instead, you gently encourage them to shine it on the many wonderful things in their life. And you do that by directing them in a different. So come up with your own mechanisms by which you can do that. One thing that somebody in one of my coaching clients discovered is that he ends the meeting by saying, thank you very much. Now, before we end up, I'd like each of you to think of some way in which you can help somebody else on the team. And they do it publicly. When you're all wrapped up in these are the things which are wrong in my life, you're feeling a great deal of stress. But if you can take some of that energy and say, what is it that I can do now to help somebody else? Done. Another of my coaching clients has taken his entire employee force over to a shelter which deals with, disadvantaged children. Most of them are autistic, and they spent an entire day, reading, helping them with toy, playing games with them, and so on. And that was deeply energizing. Think about others who are not as privileged as you are, and what is it that I can do in a concrete fashion? So if you come up with a whole bunch of interventions like that, you're gradually helping them shine the flashlight of their awareness on the many things which are good in their life, and that you'll find automatically reduces the stress.
Okay. Thank you. That helps.
Any other questions?
I have one.
Sure.
Since many of us are in a position where we're having to provide supervision or to give feedback to teachers in their performance, when you do come across someone that you need to give some constructive criticism or feedback to, do you have any suggestions on how to do that in the most positive light?
Absolutely.
When there are still skills that need to be addressed that are not working well.
Absolutely. First of all, what persons typically say is, you ought to make it a sandwich. Say something good about the person first, and then give the feedback for the car, and then say something good afterwards. And in my experience, that does not work. It simply leaves the person confused as to, am I being praised, or am I being told what I need to do differently? It's much better to be direct. Don't be harsh, but be direct. And it's a very good idea to anchor the person in the feeling that, I am the kind of person who takes criticism well and can handle it. And the way you do that is by telling the person up front, hey, Janet, I know that you are a person who can appreciate criticism and you don't get defensive and you use it to work ahead. And I know you are that kind of a person. So you're planting a reference frame in that person. And then you say, this is what needs to be changed. And by the way, don't give a general thing like you write poor emails. Give a specific one. This is an email that you wrote. This is the impression created on the recipient of the email. And this is how you could have done it differently. So you're specific in terms of what was done, why it was not appropriate, and what should be done.
Okay.
And then leave the person to think about it. And once again, when you end that, say thank you and reinforce the notion that this is a person who not only can take criticism, but welcomes it and uses it well.
I really appreciate
that. And
that.
always come back with, and what can I do to help you?
Okay. That is fabulous. And I have had that experience where I've done the sandwich and had someone come back to me after a meeting and go, oh, I thought you were trying to tell me something good. And now that I've thought about it, I realize you were trying to help me with something I wasn't doing right.
So the sandwich doesn't work. Don't try it. Just be direct. Don't be harsh, but be direct. And always anchor the person in, you're the kind of person who can appreciate criticism and take it well.
Okay.
Because once they have that as the self-image, they're not becoming defensive. Because they've anchored them in the positive one of, I'm the kind of person who can take criticism. So.
All right. That's helpful. Thanks.
Very welcome. All right, everybody. I wish you a terrific day, and I wish you a terrific rest of your life. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rao.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Cher.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.